Kamala Harris has revealed some of her one-day priorities, or day one priorities, should she win the U.S. election in November.
I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward.
Well, there she is in her first interview since becoming the Democratic nominee, and she shed some new light on proposals to govern. She was also pressed about changing positions on key issues such as immigration and climate. Pundits are breaking down Harris's performance for sure, but she is not the only one under scrutiny today. So too are her opponents, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and that's all over their attacks on her, which are being seen as vulgar and misogynistic by many. CBC's Katie Nicholson is in Washington with more.
So let's start with J.D. Vance, of course, Trump's running mate. Last night, he posted an old viral video on X of a teenage beauty contestant who badly flubbed a question. And he wrote, "Breaking, I have gotten a hold of the full Kamala Harris CNN interview." And that post in and of itself trades on, of course, misogynist and reductive tropes about beauty queens being stupid and insinuating that Harris, by extension, fits in this category. So this morning, when he was told that the young contestant in that video, Caitlin Upton, was traumatized by how that embarrassing moment was so widely shared back in 2007 and even contemplated suicide, J.D. Vance said this.
Politics has gotten way too lame, John, way too boring. You can have some fun while making a good argument to the American people about how you're going to improve their lives. I'm not going to apologize for posting a joke, but I wish the best for Caitlin. I hope that she's doing well. And again, what I'd say is one bad moment shouldn't define anybody, and the best way to deal with this stuff is to laugh at ourselves.
Of course, the trouble with that answer is that Vance isn't laughing at himself. The optics, if you parse it, he's making a joke about a woman at the expense of another woman. But that is not the only post that's getting this team into hot water. One post in particular shared by Donald Trump, a photo of Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. And I'm going to warn you now that the joke attached to it is very vulgar. So if you have little ones that you don't want to hear this, just sort of turn off the TV. This is your moment. It basically says, it's funny how blowjobs impacted both of their careers differently. That, of course, a reference to Bill Clinton's inappropriate behavior with a White House intern, as well as an insinuation that Harris slept her way to a position of influence. So none of that likely to win over many women voters.
That is the CBC's Katie Nicholson in Washington. So for more on this, we have reached Karrin Vasby Anderson. She is a professor of communications at Colorado State University. She wrote a book titled Woman President, Confronting Post-Feminist Political Culture. So she joins us from Colorado. Thank you so much for making the time. You know, these things that we have been seeing in the last couple of days from Vance and Trump, misogynist attacks against Harris. Are you surprised at all?
I'm not. Continues a pattern that's been longstanding for women presidents, presidential candidates. So women who are looking to occupy leadership positions always have to negotiate what's called the double bind between femininity and competence. So women can either be perceived as sort of likable, appealing women, or they can be perceived as credible candidates and leaders. But it's hard for them to inhabit both sides of that equation at the same time, whereas men can be viewed as likable, but also leaderly. So what happens with women is one of the signs that this cultural double bind is enforced is through language. So if we hear that, say, a woman candidate who is doing well in the polls, but maybe people are like, oh, is she likable? She's having a likability problem. We're not going to want to have a beer with her. That's a sign that the double bind is kind of enforced. So that's one response to women candidates. Another one is to say that they're not credible as leaders, and to do that by sexualizing them. So that's what you were talking about in that earlier segment, just Kamala Harris being inappropriately sexualized in ways that have nothing to do with her qualifications or the office that she's seeking.
You know, the last time we went through this with Trump was in 2016 in Hillary Clinton's run. How would you characterize how the attacks have evolved? Are they worse, or have they gotten better?
It's interesting. So, in terms of Trump's tactics, we certainly didn't see anything like that post, that Truth Social post that you mentioned, with respect to Hillary. But he has made a point of calling both of them nasty. That's a word that he tends to reserve for the women that he hates the most. And it also is meant to suggest that there's something deeply unappealing about a woman who's seeking executive authority. So that's been pretty similar. One thing that he has said about Harris in a recent interview, he said, "Oh, world leaders are going to walk all over her." And then he sort of intimated that that was in part, but that they would like talking to her because she was physically attractive. So he's sexualizing her in ways that he didn't sexualize Hillary Clinton. With Hillary Clinton, he was much less likely to sexualize her in a negative way. He posted memes like, even Bill Clinton doesn't want her, or things like that. So both women have been sexualized by Donald Trump, but in very different ways. One thing that I think that speaks well of the current climate, though, is if you watch the Democratic National Convention, you could see that the men in the Democratic Party got behind Harris in ways that they have never gotten behind any woman candidate, including Hillary Clinton, when they nominated her.
You know, the other difference I've noticed is how the Harris campaign seems to be handling these attacks. So much was made of Hillary Clinton being a historic candidacy, that she was running to break down that glass ceiling. The Harris campaign does not seem to be putting as much attention on the historic nature of her campaign, and it's arguably more historic given that she's not only a woman, she's a woman of color.
Right. It's a hugely historic moment. And I think that there's a couple things going on there. One is that after 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost, and it was considered a bit of a surprise, there really was a lot of discussion in U.S. media about how the media treated Hillary Clinton. And it's reflected in mainstream coverage of Harris. And so I think that Harris knows that the historicity of her candidacy is not going to go by anyone. Everybody knows that she's a historic candidate, so she doesn't really need to say that. But I also think it's tamped down on some of the really most sexist framing that Hillary Clinton got from the press, because the press was went through a self-reflection exercise when she lost to Trump. The other thing that Harris is doing great, though, is she's turning supposed liabilities into strengths. So for a while, people were like, "Oh, listen to her laugh. Her laugh is so annoying. I can't believe that she wants to run for president." And then Doug Emhoff, her husband, when he was giving his speech at the Democratic National Convention, said, "I love that laugh. That laugh is great." And then the Harris campaign came forward with this politics of joy, a joyful politics. And so then her laughing was seen as something that, not all men find objectionable, and in fact is part of her larger political philosophy. So I think that she is succeeding both because Hillary Clinton paved the way and the press are a bit more reflective about how they cover women candidates, and because she's turning these liabilities very strategically into assets.
We got to leave it there, Karrin. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.